150 days. Can you believe it? That's how long it's been since March 15th, when we made the decision to cancel in-person worship and go from there. It's now been 150 days of doing new things, of trying new things, of trying to figure out how to be church together for the sake of the world, when the world has become a dispersed world, a world that is obsessed and kind of squeezed by COVID-19. So I thought it would be worth just kind of reviewing a little bit where we've been in these last 150 days. So as I said, it started on March 15th. I remember pretty distinctly, I believe it was the day or 2 days before, when I was in JFK Hospital visiting a parishioner. When I went in, they didn't have any protocols for keeping people out, and by the time I left, they were zapping everybody's forehead, and there were actual armed guards hanging out at the front checking people in. So somewhere between my entrance and my exit, they had changed the protocols on what and who could get into the hospital. So then we decided that, because JFK Hospital was doing that, and because the local schools had decided to close up, that we too would close up in-person worship, at least, for the 2 weeks that we were told that this would last. And at that point, I made my first pastoral video. You can go back on our website and look at, I had a lot bushier hair at that time. So just looking at that particular day, the 15th, we had 29 new cases of COVID and 96 active cases in New Jersey. Then, going forward a little bit, that Wednesday we did our first Lenten online Vespers, and I did another pastoral video. So that established a pattern that I've pretty much kept with for you all of every Sunday and every Wednesday I do some sort of video to keep everybody connected. By that point we had 422 cases. Then the next day, the church council and I met on Zoom to figure out exactly what the plan was. And having looked at the CDC's website and guidelines for churches, they had recommended at that point an 8-week pause, which would have ended on May 3rd. So we said, okay, we'll give that a try. We'll still check in at some point just to see if perhaps things go away a little sooner, that it is a 2-week thing, not an 8-week thing. Wouldn't that have been nice? Then by that next Sunday, Jim and I moved from putting a YouTube video of the sermon on to having a split worship of half of it being music, the second half being the liturgy, and we cut it up in about half-an-hour increments, figuring that's about how long the average TV show is, so it would be the kind of length of time that you all would be used to listening to and watching a program. So yeah, this was all done on Facebook Live and then sent out, so people were able to see it live and comment if they could, or look at it later otherwise. And at that point, we'd bumped up to 1,894 new active cases of COVID in New Jersey. Then we move on into April. I sent out the Holy Week at home worship sheets, because we realized that more likely than not we were going to be having Holy Week and Easter at home. So it was a resource for you all to bring the faith into the home in a different kind of way. Then by April 26th, I finally made the decision I should have made way back in March 15th. I was 6 weeks late there of ceasing office hours because the only people that were showing up for office hours were random people from town who were wanting to tell me that COVID wasn't a real thing and it wasn't really happening. So that was already a thing that our society was starting to do all the way back in April. So, yeah, on April 26th, when I ceased office hours, there were 101,000 active cases of COVID in New Jersey and 3,526 new cases that particular day. Then on April 30th, we opened up a new way of doing Bible studies. We did I think it was a 5-week Bible study called Our Suffering, which I think people enjoyed fairly well. Not that you enjoy, reflecting on suffering as such, but it is enjoyable to know that you're not alone and that there are, in fact, ways to think about suffering. So anyway, that was April 30th, and by that point we had 110,000 active cases of COVID in New Jersey. Then on May 3rd, so this was when we'd planned on restarting if things had calmed down because it would have met the 8 weeks that the CDC had recommended. Well, yeah, this was in fact the height, one of the worst days of COVID in New Jersey. There's 3,741 new people infected in a single day. On top of that, we were up to 118,314 active cases. So on that day, being that I realized this was still going to be a while before we were going to be able to meet in person, I decided to send out a packet of prayers to everybody to encourage you all to begin or to strengthen a habit of daily prayer. In fact, praying 3 times a day. Then we get into June. On June 1st, we participated in the National Day of Mourning with a YouTube video that remembered all the folk locally as well as statewide and nationally. You might remember it was the video with the little tea lights going out one after another. At that point, we were up to 132,447 active cases in New Jersey. Then on June 13th, we had our first worship service where both Jim and myself were in the same room. So you might remember we both masked up for the first time, which of course made hearing a little harder for some of y'all, and I apologize for that. But we, want to be safe, so we masked up, and we were able to sing the liturgy, and we were able to have a whole service there. And at that point, we had 124,628 active cases. So by this point, we're actually starting to go down. The curve's finally starting to go down in the state. Then in July, on July 6th, we had our first in-person event. We had the first of our 4-part Learning Lawn Chairs and Lemonade study where we looked at a early Christian document called the Didache. And, on one hand, we did it because it's something we do every year. We do Learning Lawn Chairs and Lemonade. So it was really nice to be able to do something normal and something that wasn't just completely flipped on its head in order to work. It was something that we could actually do that we had previously done. The other thing though was we were hoping to see how ready people were for being in person, to kind of get a sense of what in-person worship might look like. Did people social distance? And of course, the first time out, I kind of poked some people with, with a yardstick. It was making sure people were 6 feet away. And we got the idea pretty quick, and we did a good job of complying with all the basic things we need to do to be safe. At that point, we were down to 102,463 active cases. So again, we're on the down slope, thank God. Um, then on July 7th, we had a council meeting where we reviewed the various responses we'd gotten because we'd sent out a survey the previous month. And just to, open, transparent, and all for y'all, a couple things that jumped out at us was one of them is 23 respondents were at high risk of dying from the coronavirus, and only five, so five out of the 28 that responded to that particular question, were not at high risk of dying of coronavirus. And yet, 24 wanted to worship outdoors, and only five did, or would be willing to worship outdoors, and only five would not. And 20 were willing to worship indoors, and 10 were not. So we moved to a plan for a phased reopening, and at that point we were down to 100,341 active cases in New Jersey. Then by July 26th, so this is just a couple weeks back now, we had our first in-person outdoor worship. And the great news there is there was a massive downflow of people who were no longer sick. We were down to 48,204 active cases in New Jersey. So again, just to get a better sense of where we were, because in the moment, we didn't have as much data as we did, and we didn't know as much as we know now. Not that we know everything, but just again to give us a sense of things. Then finally, in August, as of today, we have seen 165,000 U.S. coronavirus deaths. But here in New Jersey, active cases are down to 23,283. So we continue to see people getting better and see fewer and fewer people getting sick because we've been really working quite diligently, it seems, to keep people separate. So yeah, we're 150 days out at this point from the initial period of changing everything and becoming a dispersed church. And I think we've learned some things in the meantime. There's definitely been a lot more people have signed up for our weekly emails. We have more people that are connecting via Zoom. I've been really impressed with the number of people who've been able to figure out how to do Zoom, which has allowed us to do Bible studies. It's allowed us to do our coffee hours after worship. So we're still able to socialize with one another. We're able to do pub theology. We're able to do a lot of the things we did before, just mediated through screens of various sorts. Now, of course, I think everybody who is regularly doing that kind of thing is getting a screen fatigue, but we're at least trying to in a variety of ways, keep connected with one another and keep the faith. And to that end, one of the things I've been thinking about is that there are ways to connect that are not with screens as such, and yet are still socially distanced and safe. And one of them is podcasts. I've talked to a few of you who've become avid podcast listeners. As you've been baking, as you've been doing other things like that, you've also been listening to podcasts about your various interests. So you'll notice in the message this week, I've added 5 or 6 different podcasts by ELCA members, and I talk a little bit about how when I was doing Young Adults in Global Mission over in England, it was, a little, you felt separated. You felt kind of alone, kind of separated from the faith communities I'd built up, both my folk out in Oregon, as well as my home church in Cheyenne, Wyoming, but also disconnected from the larger group of young adults and global mission people who had come to know in the training sessions. So one of the neat things the LCA did was send out CDs to all of us with a radio show that since has went off the air. It was an ELCA radio show, Faith Matters, and it was yeah, just really a lifeline for me. And I hope some of these podcasts that I've sent out to you all will be a lifeline for you as well. So with that, God bless, and celebrate this 150 days in some way. Recognize that we still need to be gentle to each other. Maybe go for a walk if it's not thundering and lightning out there for a while. Maybe do something for your mental and spiritual health, as we recognize that we've been doing all this social distancing and all of that for a good long time, and it's not normal. It's not an enjoyable way to live life, and yet it's the way that we can continue to live, and especially can allow the least of these, the most vulnerable of us, to continue to live. So with that, God bless.